Parliamentarians, colleagues and friends. So back in July, we had the first meeting of parliamentarians under the umbrella of the Asian Alliance, and I was here on part of Dignity. Some of you may know our organization. We are a Danish NGO. We are free of party politics, and we are 100% non-profit. And we are mainly funded by the Danish government. So we are working with rehabilitation of torture victims, and we are also working with prevention of torture. Now, back in our meeting in 2012, it became a historical turning point. It was the first time I had the opportunity to sit with parliamentarians, human rights defenders in a safe place here in Hong Kong. And we discussed the political will to stop torture in Asia. I think it was actually maybe the first meeting we had here in Asia of its kind. We discussed political tactics, we voiced our concerns, and we agreed to a vision of a world without torture and how we are facing similar struggles in our countries, but also that each of our countries is unique and we need unique solutions. It's a very demanding task to stop torture, but I'm proud to say that I have met political champions that have encouraged my job, my work, by your dedication and willingness to never give up. As I understand the purpose of our meeting in the coming 3 days, it is that we should think deep, we should reflect, we should not be too academic, but we have this avenue where we can share our country experiences. Now, last year, the chairman of Asian Human Rights Commission, John Clancy, he told us the inspiring story of how Hong Kong moved from old-style policing to a modern policing. It happened almost 40 years ago, he told us. He exemplified how a modern policing system has implications that go far beyond the field of criminal justice. In fact, it has implications for what, and I quote, the realizations of full and genuine democratization of our societies. So John corrected a common misconception that policing without torture is impossible. In fact, I could add stories from Denmark, the country where I come from, and how courageous Danish politicians more than 100 years ago planted seeds for sustaining our democracy, to stop corruption, and to develop policing without torture, which is now a historic reality in my country. So a few words about the objectives for our meeting here. So we should look for ways to explore how to have fundamental reforms of the policing system in Asian countries. And as it says, any serious discussion of the elimination of torture must be linked with reforms of the policing system. In the invitation that we have received, there is also some questions, and we are also cautiously warned that some of the challenges ahead of us. In example, the Asian Human Rights Commission is giving us a warning that training and education of the police force does not make a significant change in terms of the use of torture. And also that the practice of torture is in fact encouraged by governments as the most important tool for the police and crime investigation, as well as control of societies. Now, on the occasion of June 26, the day in support of victims of torture, Asian Human Rights Commission campaigned against police torture in Asia. They produced a video on the occasion, and country by country they argued that thorough police reform is a prerequisite to stop torture. In fact, I hope that we may have the opportunity to see that great video that you have produced, because I think that it can serve as a lot of inspiration for our discussion here in the coming 3 days. So, Asian Human Rights Commission early on has also raised the relevant question, that is, what are the shared views of the women in Asia about policing? And they collected views from many different Asian countries where they where they invited them to talk about the policing system in their countries and where they live. And sadly, the opinion of these women on the police was very similar. And it is one of massive suspicion, of fear and unhappiness. These women, they shared that making a complaint to the police would create problems bigger than those that they are trying to solve in the first place, which is a horrible situation. So we are at the tragic point of human development where the police and law enforcement is not a protector of legitimate rights. In fact, these forces have become a direct threat to their society. So let me pick up a challenging question which was raised in Europe by a group about policing and human rights in Europe. They ask, is your police service a human rights champion? And I think the response to such a question by the Asian women would be a very loud and very alarming, certainly, definitely not. So what should we do about it? Now, here I would like to quote from Iran Vikramaratne from Sri Lanka, which is here today, because I saw his message in an article where he's commenting on a book of Basil. He's saying, it is perhaps unrealistic that we can hope for a society completely free from individual police personnel committing acts of torture. Nevertheless, he's saying, it is our duty to ensure that while the individual may fail the system does not fail the individual, which I think is a very strong statement. Let me just move to another part of the world, that is to the Arab world, where I picked up a quote by a Mr. Robert Lambert, which is a British author, and he's discussing how to develop policing without torture after the Arab Spring. Now, he's giving a narrative of a torture survivor. It's a very strong narrative. The torture survivor is saying, yet another torture survivor evokes the same sense of torture as a routine business when recalling how the police officer who had inflicted significant pain and injury on him subsequently joked with him that it was nothing personal, that he, the torturer, he would be happy to carry out the same activity on his behalf, the victim, if the victim ever came to power, which I think is another quite thought-provoking narrative. Now back to Denmark again. Before I left home the other day, I looked at the purpose and the duties of the Danish police as defined in the Act of Police Activities. It says, and I quote, in brief, the most important tasks of the police is to ensure that the legislation adopted by politicians is complied with. In addition, the police must also maintain security, peace and order among the citizens to ensure that everybody can move freely and safely everywhere in the country. So with these thought-provoking words, I welcome you all again, and I think that the scene is set for 3 days of reflection and exchange on this very important topic. Thank you very much and welcome.